talent that was shared with us today through Matt and Becky. Yes, that you give all of us graces to be here and to be able to present, be able to receive, and be able to share. And we ask that you be with us in a special way this day. We ask in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. So that was a little mic check. Anybody have a hard time here? Are we okay with the mic? Okay. Guys in the back are saying yes. Well, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to do a little technical thing here. It's going to take a little while. We're going to switch out the computers. So the first thing I'm going to ask you people about is, what does salvation history mean to you? And one of my promises I will make to you is I will never ask you a question that I know the answer to. So if I know the answer, I'm not going to ask you guys the question. So the question that I'm going to ask you straight up here at the beginning is, what does salvation history mean to you? I don't know that answer, right? You're the only one in the world that knows the answer. What does salvation mean? Salvation history. Please put it. It's coming.
What do you mean?
Come on. All right. Woo. Slide into one. This worked a lot faster than I tried it out about an hour ago. All right. So is anyone able to share with me what the answer to the question is for you? What does salvation history mean to you? I have a reason for asking this. Anybody want to look at you? God's school of trust. Is that what you said? Okay, good. Love that. Thank you for sharing. Anybody have something else that came to their mind? You.
It makes me think of how God used my life to help me to be faithful so that I might
How God is working in your life to help you be faithful to, what was the last part?
so that I can be faithful and be with Him.
And be with Him. Gotcha. All right. Anything else? Is there one more? All right. What's that?
I think I have to say that just God's work basically throughout history to help us all.
What God has been doing throughout history so that what?
So that we can all be together with Him.
In heaven. Good. Okay. So the reason why I asked that question is I just want to, everybody, I'm pretty sure if we went through everybody had a little different answer. Okay, so everybody's coming into this about the salvation history talk. Salvation history means something to me, and I'm going to share that with you just so you guys know what I'm talking about whenever I'm talking about salvation history. I don't think there's like a right or wrong, like has to be like this. This is me talking to you about what I think salvation history is, okay? So this is, just want to make sure we're on the same page. I don't want to go running down the road talking about something, you guys say, hey, you should be over here. That's not, I think it's something different. That's what see what I'm saying? Salvation. In Christianity, there's two ultimate destinations for us. At the end, there's only two places we can go. We can go to heaven, where we'll be with God. We'll be with God for all eternity. Or we could be with outside of heaven. We call that hell. So you'll be away from God for all eternity. So sometimes you'll hear people talk about the word saved. Have you been saved? Well, you kind of, in that case, that context is kind of like you've been, like, it's not hell. Like, saved means you're not in hell. That's kind of the focus there. And so we use the word salvation to mean heaven. We're with God in heaven. That's our salvation. So it's got a more positive sense of the same word is so we use the word salvation oftentimes. Sometimes the people hear people saved, which is fine. I mean, it's either the one or the other. But the thing is that salvation has this meaning where we want to have a relationship with God so that when we die, two things happen. Number one, we receive an invitation from God to be with Him in heaven. That's number one. But we want a second thing to happen. The second thing is we want to have the disposition, the internal disposition to accept the invitation. There are people that will not want to accept an invitation, but they would not want to be in heaven with God. And the reason is they may not want to put up with whatever rules or however it is you have to be in heaven. Some people just want to be mean to other people. There are people that truly want to be mean to others. And so they're not going to like heaven. And so God gives them a place to be away from him because they're not going to want to be there. So, so that's what the whole thing, that's what our main goal is, to try to help people to, number one, put themselves in position to be able to receive an invitation from God, and two, to be able to have the disposition to accept it. Now, God has chosen to reveal himself gradually through time. And there's reasons for that. I mean, we would kind of respond to story. The story after story happens, the reason why you even have like 911. And there's a story behind that. And humans in general, as a group, we respond to story. And so God has chosen to talk to us, interact with us through story. And so he's chosen to reveal himself throughout history, slowly and gradually. Now that process of revelation culminated in the incarnation of Jesus, his life, his suffering, his death, his resurrection. Those things kind of is the pinnacle, or the completion of the revelation of God to man. Now, the bride of Christ, which now mystically subsists in the Catholic Church, but we kind of call the bride of Christ all the baptized. So all the baptized, whether or not they're in the Catholic Church or not, we kind of, then collectively, that's the bride of Christ. That's kind of the normal means that God uses to grant salvation. So, when we say normal means, there's normal and extraordinary means. So for me, the normal way to get here to this thing was to get in my car and drive here to church. Now, extraordinary means maybe me walking or taking a hot air balloon. There's other different ways, but when we talk about the bride of Christ and how God works through the bride of Christ to grant us what we need for our salvation, that is essentially what we're talking about, is the normal means. And so that's essentially what we're talking about when I'm talking about salvation history. We want ultimately to understand, we want to understand God a little bit, and we also want to understand what we can do to be in right relationship with God. And he's helped us understand that throughout history, through all these different stories that we have access to. Now I'm going to ask you a question, and the reason I'm going to this is a question where when you see the question, I want you to think about the answer that you give and not let yourself be derailed by what you hear around you. Like if I see people come up with a different thing, just hold on to what your answer is for you on this one. How do you know when someone loves you? How do you know when someone loves you? Anybody want to take a shot at that? Yes, ma'am. They want what's best for you. Yeah. So when a person wants what's best for you, that's how you know when someone loves you. That's great. Yes, ma'am. They're willing to sacrifice anything for you. Okay. Yes, that's good for you. Okay. They don't go out of their way to break your leg or something like that. Okay. No, they want to do something that's good for you. Okay. And one more, yes. They want to spend time with you. Right. Because that's great. I love that. Okay, great. So those are different ways that, and I'm going to guess that people have different answers about how do you know when someone loves you, but it's super important when you think about salvation history, especially God, trying to work with us over time to help us to want to draw him to himself and ultimately experience our salvation in heaven. It's really important for us to understand this question. How do you know? How do we know if God would love us, for example? But whenever we are loving one another, we desire what's best for that person. So that's how we love that person. We want what's good for them, right? And we will have opportunities to provide what's best for them. We'll have some way of being able to do that. Now the thing is that we're in the physical world, right? And so there's limitations. We have limitations on our time, our resources. We also have just our human capacity is limited. And so then we have to make choices, prioritize. Okay, what am I going to do? What am I going to not do? And so those choices means that you're having to go without some things in order to do other things. So if I'm going to do what's best for someone, that means I'm going to give up, doing something for myself. And so the choice to spend on another means that you sacrifice. So it would not be too surprising to us to see that whenever we are looking at God coming at us through history, especially through Christ, that sacrifice would be involved. You would think that sacrifice would be an important part of that, because love without sacrifice, it is not possible. And that's one of the things I think that with our young kids, if they're dating someone and they're seeing that the person that they're with is not really interested in going out of their way at all to do anything with them, that would be a pretty good indication that they're in a relationship that's not good for them, right? Because that person is showing them, I'm not willing to sacrifice for you. There's no love there. There's lots of different ways to take, these thousands and thousands of years of history and dice them up. People have taken different paths. For example, there's this idea of looking at different ages. You have this age of innocence with Adam and Eve, and so on. Now, I've got a different way that I like to talk about history, divide history up, and I focus on these different covenants that God has. It kind of has this crescendo, it has this pattern to it that I like. We've got Adam, where he's got this covenant that he makes with Adam and Eve, right? God makes this covenant with Adam and Eve, and so that covenant is this marriage covenant. And then you go to Noah. Noah's got this idea where God makes this covenant with his family. And then I will go through each of these eventually, but the thing is, we go to Abraham, now we got to a tribe, and then you have Moses, he's got this nation, right, this group of tribes. And you got David, who's got a kingdom, an international kingdom. And ultimately, we have Jesus, the covenant he makes with us is with all of humanity. It's all encompassing. So we have this different kind of, this crescendo of covenants. That's what I like to look at. That's a picture. I don't know if you can see the picture very well in the situation here, but this is a picture of God creating Eve. And it's such a strange story, like so weird, isn't it? Where you've got Adam, the guy, which it never happens in nature that the guy is the one that has something coming out of him, right? It's always a woman, right? But here the guy is the one. And here it's just coming out, popping out of his side, right? So Adam's in a deep sleep, cost him some bodily material, and here comes the woman straight out of the side. They come, Holy Spirit inspired people to write. They're like, okay, they were like, hey, this makes sense, right? It's kind of weird, right? But this first covenant is formed. Adam and Eve are kind of this one flesh. I think to some degree, it shows that, Adam and Eve are the same nature. They're both human, right? They both have a soul, have a body, they both have a heart and an intellect. So they're the same nature. So that's how we get started. But of course, Adam and Eve in the fall, Adam and Eve, they were in paradise. They had things going very well for them. Adam and Eve, they sinned against God. And so that kind of changes the trajectory of humanity a little bit. And there's this idea of original sin. Now, there's one thing that drives me crazy is whenever people will talk about original sins, that like this baby was born, we have this baby here that's got baptized, that's Becky's baby. But the idea is that that baby was somehow born with this extra thing stuck to it. This extra thing like to its soul, like this goo, this black goo. You want to wash that off in baptism. And that is not what original sin is. Original sin is where you have this lacking. So the idea is that Adam and Eve, they were with God in the Garden of Eden, all right? And then they sinned against God. And so now they're outside the Garden of Eden. They're away from God. They kind of essentially turned their back on him. So now they're less than. That's really what happens, right? There's something missing from them. They had something, and now it's missing. So now when Adam and Eve had kids, there is this inheritance that they had that they lost. They lost this inheritance. And as a consequence, they couldn't pass it on. And so a consequence, we don't have that inheritance either. And so that's the whole idea of, we have Adam and Eve with the original covenant, we have the original sin, and all about this whole history, salvation history up until Jesus, is all about trying to bring us back and reconcile that relationship, that inheritance that was lost. That's what it's all about. We have Noah and the flood. So now, as you progress from Adam and Eve and the corruption that entered the world through their sin, we get to Noah. And at this point, the world is almost completely corrupt. And so God invites Noah to sacrifice, to build a big ark. Okay, I just spent almost 2 years remodeling my little house. I think building a big ark, that would be a big sacrifice. It took a long time. That might be why I had to live to 600 or whatever. So the thing is, to build this big ark, but the idea is with the flood, what God is doing is He is restoring the earth through the flood. So you look at the earth before the flood with all the corruption. After the flood, you have essentially a world where there's been a restoration of the world. And of course, in 1 Peter, he talks about this specifically, and he's relating the flood, the Noah flood, to baptism. So, in it he also went to preach to the spirits in prison, who had once been disobedient, while God patiently waited in the days of Noah, during the building of the ark, in which a few persons, 8 in all, were saved through water. This prefigures baptism, which saves you now. So baptism saves you. So the idea of baptism is this bringing you back. It's bringing you back into the family, bringing you back into your inheritance that was lost with Adam and Eve. So this is all to say that the flood does something really important for us today. The flood happened a long time ago. There was this corruption that was cleaned off, but there's a story there. There's a story that we can relate to and understand. And that's what, whenever we're baptized, there's that same kind of restoration that happens to us. And so we have the story of Abram with his son Isaac. So that's a really tough story. And whenever that's being read in church, it just cringe, right? Here's God telling Abram, take your son, go up to the mountain, put him on the altar, and kill him. And it's just, it's kind of an intense story. But the thing is that this is obviously going to be a prefiguring of Christ. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. But the thing is, Abram trusted God so much that he went ahead and went through it. Of course, God stopped him before he actually did it, but he made the choice. He made the choice to actually kill Isaac. But that was prevented, that was thwarted by God's angel. Now, through Abram's obedience, God is now going to bring about a new covenant, and he changes Abram's name to Abraham. So Abraham means something totally different than Abram. Abraham means father of many nations. And so out of that, we have the 12 tribes of Israel. Kind of an important, that whole 12 tribes thing. God speaks to us through this 12 number, and that will continue to play out here. But I do want to point out one thing, that we haven't received the 10 Commandments yet. We did not have the 10 Commandments. So if Abram was trying to discern, is this a good idea? He would not have been able to really, God would not have been able to instruct him at that point, because thou shalt not kill is in the 10 Commandments. So that would have been something that would kind of violate God's own directions to us already. So I just want to point that out, as if you're trying to discern, yourself, like, hey, I think God's telling me to go kill somebody, that's not happening, okay? Christ foreshadowing. So, this is really interesting to me. There's obviously the Father killing the Son. That's obviously foreshadowing, Jesus coming to earth and dying for us on the cross. But it's really, so in Genesis, chapter 22, there's just a few verses apart, where Abraham tells them God will provide the lamb for the sacrifice. That's what he tells Isaac. And then a couple of verses later, he says, well, there's a ram caught in the thicket. So they use the ram for their sacrifice. Now, of course, if you're writing this, you're going to know just a few verses apart that those two words are not lined up. But God has promised to give us the lamb for the sacrifice. And so that's going to, of course, be Christ. Christ is going to be the lamb for us. And I just think it's kind of interesting that has persisted throughout all of history, right? It's just been a long time that this document has been around. and that little inconsistency, so to speak, has been there, but people have been okay with it. And of course, that is Christ prefigured. Now we go to Moses. So Egypt had enslaved Israel. And so Egypt wanted Israel because of all of the extra things that they, all of the work that they would do. And it was fine. It was fine for Israel to go off and do these worship. They would go off and worship, which involved sacrifice, and then they would come back. But the thing is, at some point, the Pharaoh got a little nervous that Israel was going to leave for their religious observations and not come back. So he said, no, you are not permitted to leave. Now, this whole aspect of God using Moses to come to Pharaoh and say, you need to let the Israel people go. You need to let them go. And Pharaoh said no. So that would be the opposite of sacrifice. And of course, the Bible talks about how God hardened his heart. But that is this Jewish idea where if you take a rag that's full of something and you squeeze it, you harden that rag basically, and what comes out of it? Whatever's in the rag is what comes out of it. And so that phrase, I will harden Pharaoh's heart, that's what it's talking about. So we're going to see what Pharaoh is made of in this whole process. And so, of course, Pharaoh rejects God's offer to let people go until after, once again, the firstborn sons are killed in Egypt. And so that was the last of the plagues. Now this plays an enormous role today. So that night that the firstborn sons are killed, Israel's instructed to get a lamb, and to sacrifice the lamb. It's an unblemished lamb, and it's a firstborn male lamb. Now, it's important to note that you had to eat the lamb, number one. And the idea is that you put the blood on the doorpost in the houses where people ate the lamb. Okay, that was a critical part of the whole thing. And this is going to be foreshadowing the Eucharist, right? This is the idea, the body and blood of the lamb in the sacrifice that's setting Israel free from their slavery. And we're going to have the body and blood of Christ that sets us free from this journey, this place that we're here. This is not our home. Helps us to go home. Helps us to go to our promised land. So this whole idea with Moses and Exodus, that's foreshadowing the Eucharist is coming up here. So this whole slide is all about, in the time of Jesus, the Jewish people were looking for a Messiah. They knew a Messiah was coming, and the Messiah would do the sign. And so here, like in John chapter 6, the Pharisees are coming to Jesus, do the sign, do the sign. And the sign was making manna come down from heaven. That was the sign. And our ancestors ate manna in the desert. He gave them bread from heaven to eat. So the Pharisees were seeing Jesus and they're thinking, this looks a lot like the Messiah that we're expecting. Do the sign. Now, of course, the manna that is coming down from heaven is happening, but it's happening in the Eucharist, in our Mass. That is the sign. That is the sign that Jesus is the Messiah. There's this thing that drives me crazy. So if you ever, I know some of you, this might be too old for some people, but the Ten Commandments with Charlton Heston. So there's this thing in there where a Jewish girl has a big crush on some Egyptian boy, and she knows that that night he's going to get killed. So she decides to go take some of the blood from her house and put it on his doorpost, right? And the thing is that then he's spared. That's the one Egyptian boy that was spared. That totally disconnects the understanding of what the lamb, the sacrifice, and how that plays out in today's world with the Eucharist. It disconnects that. It disconnects that from what is actually happening in the story. So the story was just wrong, and I guess in order to just emphasize that, Exodus chapter 12, it says, every firstborn in the land of Egypt was struck down, and everybody in Israel was saved. And so, I guess once you start to get, away from the Jewish history, you kind of start to lose. I guess they were kind of adding some sort of, I don't know, they were adding something to the story, or something, make it exciting. I guess it wasn't exciting enough. So I'm going to pause here for a second. We're about to get into King David. So is there anything that's so far up to here that someone is having a hard time with, or someone want to ask a question or something like that? Anybody? Something really sticking in your craw? Anything? No? Okay. So King David, so now we're up to kingdom, right? So you have King David and his kingdom, and of course, God elevates this nation to this international kingdom, and so God this is kind of a foreshadowing, right, of Christ and the Messiah through various aspects of the new kingdom. We have this throne, right? We say that Jesus is in heaven; He's sitting on His throne in heaven. And we have the divine sonship of the heirs, right? Through baptism, we regain our lost inheritance. And then there's this whole idea of the temple, the centrality of the temple. The temple is the middle of everything. It's in the kingdom of David, everything. You went to the kingdom, into the temple to do everything there. And so that's prefiguring this church that Jesus is going to start. And that's the idea behind the kingdom of David. They're just what God is showing us through this story, right? It's kind of this crescendo up to Jesus Christ. This is you had the life, the whole. It is everything. It's everything for Jesus came. He had His life. He suffered. He died, and then He was resurrected. So the incarnation. I mean, we breathe this stuff all the time. It's so normal for us, right? But the thing is, the incarnation is this time where the relationship between God and mankind, humans, all of us, that was ruptured. That was a total change in all ways. Because before, God was other, right? He's something else. We have humans, we have God, and there's this gigantic disparity between us. But after that, God came down to become human. So in some ways, He came down. And then for us, we are now of the same species of Christ, Jesus, right? We are of the same species. So Jesus has two natures, divine and human, and we have the exact same nature. Our human nature is the same as Jesus' human nature. It totally changes things. And now people have a very hard time getting their head around this, because if you look at whenever, like around 312 or so, and Constantine said, okay, we are no longer going to persecute Christians. It's going to be an illegal religion, and along with a bunch of other religions. People started talking about, exactly who is Jesus. Was He really God? People have a hard time, was He really God? I mean, really? And so you have the Arians that were like, He was really good, but not God. And so in order to fight that, Athanasius, he taught people, this is the reality. This is the reality of Christ. And so, so we got the Word became flesh to make us partakers of the divine nature. Well, this is why the Word became man, and the Son of God became the Son of man. So that man, by entering into communion with the Word, and thus receiving divine sonship, might also become a son of God. Okay, our inheritance is being restored back to the way it was without a need. For the Son of God became man, so that man might become God. And I'm not saying that you can go off and make your own universes and things like that. That is not what this is saying. It's saying man is of the same nature. And so this Athanasius is trying to teach, and people accepted it, that Jesus is God. He's human and God. And this was a big teaching that we accepted that pretty much defeated Arianism back in the 4th century. All right. So Jesus was so human. He died, right? His human nature died. When He was on the cross, He died. And so to make that point clear, They use the phrase, he descended into hell. Now, today, we have a different meaning for hell than what they were talking about. So unfortunately, hell meant one thing, and we're using the same word to mean something totally different. What hell means, in the context of the Apostles' Creed, is the place of the dead. So hell was this place that everybody, it didn't matter who you were, Abraham, Isaac, if you died, Moses, you went to hell. And it was just the place of the dead. And he referred to like the bosom of Abraham as this place where you weren't really damned. But in order to make it clear, whenever we say he descended into hell, we are saying that he died. In his humanity, he died. And so God sacrificed. And here's the thing, right? You know, God wants to show us he loves us. And so how is he going to do that without becoming human and having the limitations and all of the suffering that goes on and making the choices, making this back and forth? I mean, he actively chose to die. It's not something that we get to do, right? Because we don't really have as much ownership for our bodies as he does. But the thing is, he chose to die. So he became human, and his death on the cross was a huge sacrifice for us. And of course, that is him showing how he loves us. And it is, of course, God showing us he loves us on the cross is why we put everything on the cross. All the graces that come to us through baptism, confirmation, the Eucharist, reconciliation, marriage, everything rests on the cross. And that's why in all the Catholic churches, the cross is a big deal. Jesus on the cross, that's when God was showing us he loved us. And he sacrificed like that for us. So John the Baptist points to Jesus and says, there is the Lamb of God. There is the Lamb of God. Now the Jewish people at the time would have had no problem understanding exactly what he's talking about, because the lambs involved at the Last Supper, they celebrate the Passover. They celebrate the Passover, and 250,000 lambs minimum every year were slaughtered. They were slaughtered in the temple. And so all their blood, for all those different lambs, was drained out, poured onto the altar. That's a big scene. That's a big sight. And all the different Jewish people participated in that every year. So whenever John the Baptist points and says, that's the Lamb of God, they understand very clearly, this is God coming to us, and he's going to be the Lamb. That means he's going to be sacrificed for us, just like the Lamb was in the Passover. So this picture here on the left, it's kind of this odd detail when Jesus is dying. He's there, he's dead. So you put a spear in his side, and water and blood comes out. So they take the time to put water and blood flow out of the side of Jesus. It's kind of an interesting detail. They could have brought up so many details, but it's really important that that particular detail was there. Water and blood out of the side of Jesus, because the temple, at the same moment, right, at 3 o'clock on Friday, when Jesus dies, that's the same time when they are sacrificing all those lambs and pouring all their blood on the altar in the temple. And as you know, there was a stream running through the temple, and it exited out the east side, out toward the Mount of Olives. And now, whenever you've got all this blood coming out of all these lambs, it's also flowing out. So you have the blood and water flowing out of the temple at the exact same time Jesus has his blood and water flowing out of his side. And so it just says, Jesus is the new temple. The old temple where there was sacrifice, and that's how God was coming to us, and we would go and sacrifice a lamb, like we're giving up a lot of our material to enter into this relationship with God. God himself is having that same sacrifice, and he's replacing the whole temple. That's a big part of this. And there's one more thing. We're coming back to that beginning with Adam and Eve and that weird story with Eve coming out of the side of Jesus. Well, here, from a long time, patristic writers have talked about how the water and the blood flowing out of the side of Jesus. It represents the water, represents baptism of waters that come to us, and the blood represents the Eucharist. And so the water and the blood that are coming out of the side of Jesus, just in the same way that material was taken from Adam to make his bride, this material that comes out of Jesus is used to make his bride. And his bride is the bride of Christ. And so all of the baptized are united into this bride of Christ. So Jesus is giving us his church. So this is one thing I do want to pause for just a second here, because it can be very confusing, right? We have our humanity, right? Me being up here talking to you as if now I'm not the bride of Christ, and I'm not anywhere near as holy and undefiled as the bride of Christ, right? And none of the clergy are, and none of the laity are. So you have this admixture going on. Whenever I think of the bride of Christ, I'm thinking about the sacraments, right? I go in and talk to the priest and confess my sins, and the things that change in me as a part of the graces that I receive, that's all the bride of Christ coming at me, right? But the individuals with their brokenness, that is not what we're calling part as the bride of Christ. So it's a mystical thing going on here. The bride of Christ comes out the side of Jesus the same way Eve did. The bride of Christ has the same nature, right? Completely human, completely divine. It's that same nature that Jesus has. One more thing. There's this wedding feast in the book of Revelation, and it has a lot of different ways to look at it, but one of the kind of questions you might want to ask is, who's getting married, right? It's great to go to wedding feast. I love it. I mean, this October, friends of ours getting married back in Idaho. I'm going to go back to Idaho, and I'm looking forward to a big party. And a lot of times, that's just like, it's a great experience going to a wedding feast, right? And that's all